And I say that the net result is that post-Diluvian humanity, after we've been made schizoid, after we've had this splicing take place, the net result is that the post-Diluvian humanity is left with the consequences of their schizophrenia, with each person condemned like Hamlets to deal with their moral dilemmas as best they can. You're just stuck with it. You go and take care of it, whatever. As Nobel laureate Konrad Lorenz said, man is the missing link between apes and human beings. I actually believe that because of this utterly, incredibly devastating effect on our biology, that the Lemurians, trying to offset the worst of that, trying to, after the Adams and Eves went to Lemuria, and the promise was that they try to condition out the alien DNA, or even genetically, again, doubly interfere now, and try to remedy the problem. But I actually believe, just for your interest, because I know many of you are into the mystical tradition, I also believe, and we can talk about this later, that the yogic systems actually probably date from the time of Lemuria. They may have been devised for the express purpose of combating the alien proclivities or for conditioning out the alien DNA. These problematic yogic processes were merely one of the methods chosen to deal with this biological and psychological legacy. Basically, yoga had to do with cleansing and hygiene. It didn't have to do with meeting God and sitting at the right hand of Jesus and all that stuff. It had to do with cleaning your psyche. Many of the practices of yoga, which means to link back or tie together, make greater sense when understood in this context. It's just an interesting thing. However, when the Atlanteans found out that they're perfect slaves, when they wake up and there is no coffee and there is no remote control and there's no slippers under the bed, and then they go out and find out that their perfect slave has been seduced away by their first slave, they ain't happy. So unhappy are they that they actually unleashed a war, a global nuclear war on the Lemurians, on our planet, 13,000 years ago. The Lemurians, not being backward, retaliated. And we have, as all the mythologies of the world, I'm sorry, if you're not familiar with mythologies, this is going to come as like a big shock and you're not going to believe it. But do your homework and you'll find out that all the mythologies of the world talk about this, the war of the gods. And when they're talking about the war of the gods, they're also talking about the super weaponry involved. And they're also talking about psychic abilities, psychic violence taking place. This incredible global nuclear war is meant to have irradiated all the moisture in our atmosphere and also caused, magnetic storms in the ionosphere and in the Roche field limit. It had devastating consequences. And I actually believe that the radiation and fallout from that may actually have created some of the idioms that we read when we're talking about the gods. Their gigantic height, the giants, or the pied nature of their skin, or the three eyes, all that famous stuff from mythology. You can take it either way. Either the giants came here and they were giants already, huge. I actually do believe that also. But I think another contributing factor was simply the fallout. So when you're reading these weird, anecdotes and you go, this is nonsense, this is for the kids, think again. The radiation and fallout can cause those peculiarities that you read about in the descriptions of Osiris, and Set and all the different gods and the way that they appeared. Here's the dig that's happening now in Saudi Arabia, digging up the gods. And nuclear radiation is thought to have dramatically affected the pineal and pituitary glands, the endocrine system, and the DNA. This, together with massive changes in earth magnetism, led to all kinds of biological maladies. Giantism, disfigurement, vampirism, autism, hyperpigmentation, carnivorousness are all thought to have related to this. You look at the cave art you see in the Venus of Willendorf's figures, and even the little people. What's that all about? All over the world, human footprints have been found alongside dinosaur tracks. Some of those footprints are 15 inches long. But these tracks of human beings have been seen, as Michael Cremo and Graham Hancock have exposed, you see, have been found alongside dinosaurs. So have we been sold a lie about the dinosaurs? Are they reptilian creatures, ordinary reptiles that have been, their organs have been affected by the fallout? And then to hide this fact, they're telling us, they were millions of years ago. We know now that they weren't millions of years ago. So then how did they get to that size? Now, here's one of the most important statements, because a lot of you have researched this interesting information from other scholars like Zachariah Sitchin and so on. However, has something struck you that's odd? Here we are, I believe it's May 27th, Conspiracy Con, Bay Area, California. How come we're still talking about this? What we're describing happened 13,000 years ago. That's a hell of a long gap. If there's a war of the gods, how come there's no denouement? How come there's no conclusion? How come we're even still talking about this now? Because look, it's obvious, isn't it? If the Atlanteans had won, we'd all be troglodytes, slaves. And if our Lemurians If the Lemurians had won, then we'd be living in peace and harmony on a beauteous, planet in harmony. Since neither of those two things are a fact, then there must have been some variable that offset the ending. I don't know why the other scholars have not noticed this. It's always perplexed me as to why that is. There was a variable, all right. That variable, ladies and gentlemen, was the polar shift, the axial shift of our Earth, precipitated by the ferocity of the war that I described. And neither party was ready for it. Neither party knew too much about the Earth. They were recent visitors here. They didn't know too much about the ultraviolet light, the Schumann waves, and even the size of the planet and all of that. They had no idea of understanding how the planet Earth would respond with a violence of its own to their unimaginable violence. They weren't prepared for it. Now, deluge, water, boulders and stuff pouring down from the heavens in the famous 40 days of rain and whatnot is pretty cataclysmic. But the Earth does recover from that after a given period of time. Pole shift is something else again. Pole shift is, the Eiffel Tower sticking head first in Hawaii. Pole shift is boulders the size of mountains flying through the air. Pole shift is the mass extinction of almost all the flora and the fauna on the planet. It's all etched inside your racial memory, by the way. I know that the psychologists have fooled you into thinking that a lot of your psychological fears and phobias are psychological in nature. No, they're not. They're physiological in nature. They're your memory of these very events that happened in a blink of the eye ago, historically speaking. And that is the reason why none of this is here anymore. Because not one, it's another piece of disinformation, not one continent sank beneath the ocean, but at least 4. Avalon, remember famous Avalon? And Lyonesse. But actually there was massive continents. Appalachia sinks beneath the waves. Tyrrhenia, Oceania, Beringia, Fennoscandia. And the Miocene Ocean, they say, tipped out of its basin and became the Mediterranean. What the Mediterranean is today is the old Miocene Ocean, and all that got left was the Black and Caspian Sea. You can't imagine the havoc. Allen and Dallaire go into describing it in their books. I have abstractions in my book of their work and talk about it also. The world reels, the world dies. Atlas actually means, Atlas coming from Atlantis, the word actually means the one who could not withstand the skies. Ireland is actually known today to be called the Blessed or Fortunate Isles. Why? Because it was known to the people there, you see, that it had actually survived this cataclysm. That's why it was given that name. The Egyptian papyrus says that south becomes north and the earth turns over. The Bible and the apocryphal works tell us the earth is utterly broken down, moved exceedingly. Moved exceedingly? Isaiah 24 says, Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. What, this writer's on drugs now? Oh no. 2 Peter 3 says, For this they were willingly ignorant. I love that, willingly ignorant. The world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. The only place that could sustain life after that period was the area of the new equator, where our equator basically is now, in what we call Asia Minor. So the remnants of the Atlanteans set up their bases, set up their new headquarters after a semblance of normality has returned in what we know to be Mesopotamia. That's where the Sumerian, Babylonian cultures of blood, the tyrannies, the first aggressive, empires arose. And aren't all modern civilizations and cultures based on those patterns? Well, guess who was set up there? And it's from that area that they decided, these guys are pretty amazing, they decided that they weren't going to give up. They're raped of all of their technology. I mean, if the continents beneath your feet have gone down, so have all your temple citadels, so has all your crystalline technology and computers, so has a lot of your spacecrafts, and certainly your weaponry. Remember that old Superman? They're telling you the whole story in Superman. Who is the Superman who comes from another planet, who's got this temple precinct full of computers, and has remarkable powers and comes from out there?